Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to Prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's bulk, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Hi there, and welcome to Pint-Sized History. I'm Joe.
I'm Zach.
We're going back to our original format for this week. Last episode, we had Matt Lewis on to do the War of the Roses, and he was fantastic. I mean, we loved every moment of it, didn't we?
If you're listening, Matt, which by the sounds of it, before you came on last episode, you hadn't listened to a single episode before. Thank you for coming on. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, he was awesome, and it was so interesting to listen to him properly, because he was actually explaining stuff rather than just us waffling away for a solid hour or however long. So yeah, that was really enjoyable, and we just want to say thank you again, mate. We also want to say thank you to Crate Brewery, because we are sponsored by them still, and so we're having some more of their lovely IPAs. Are you having an IPA as well?
I guess we're sponsored by them until we run out of their lovely beers, but we are.
That's true.
And I'm really dangerously close. They've kindly, as you said, agreed to give us more beers and keep the code going. So for anyone listening to the podcast, go on to Crate's website or go into store. You probably can't do it in their actual pub itself, but go on their website and type in Pint-Sized 15. That's PINTSIZED 15, not 50, 15, and go get yourself a lovely beer from them.
So yeah, we're back and we're ready to do it all over again. We've got Zach, who's going to be the teacher for this episode, and I'm going to be the student that knows nothing. And I'll tell you, I actually, thinking about this on the way in, I don't think I know anything about this subject, so I'm quite. I mean, without the very, very basics. So, and it's something
you
that
don't know anything about the subject.
Not particularly. I mean, I feel like
You're a history podcast, man.
Well, yeah, to learn more about history, man. That's exactly what we do. And I don't think I reckon I know virtually nothing. I reckon 2%, 5% of what you tell me I'll know. So I'm really looking forward to this. Zach, what are we doing?
Well, you've all seen the title, but we're going to Korea.
Korea.
Ooh, the two lands of very different living, but great place.
Yes.
I might do that again.
No, I think we should keep that in.
Korea. Love Korea. But when I talk about Korea in the common sense, I typically refer to South Korea, which is the Republic of Korea.
Which is funny, because for both of them, they will refer to themselves as the Korea, when in reality, they're two sides of the same coin.
For those of you who don't know, Korea is a country in the far east of Asia. It's bordered by China, Russia, and to the south, just a hop over the sea, Japan. And at the moment, it is two different countries. Well, there are two different countries. There's North Korea, which is officially referred to as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is the DPRK. And we got South Korea, the Republic of Korea. So
yeah.
It doesn't get confusing at all, does it?
This is something I'm going to have a rant about quickly. The thing, whenever I see people say, "Oh, but the Nazis were left wing; they were called the Socialist Party." My immediate thing is always going if someone puts a value in their title, then usually they're lying and bullshitting to try and make you believe that they are actually. So when it's the Nazi Party, the Socialist Party, they're not socialist at all. And when they're the Democratic Republic of Korea, they're not democratic. And it's the same with China.
It's then when people say that the Nazis were socialists by trying to lean on the fact that they had they were trying to go for community projects and big infrastructure, the Autobahn and big industry. That doesn't, just because you do big public infrastructure doesn't make you a socialist. When in actuality you want to exterminate half the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Socialism is about progressiveness and everyone being equal, and that's just inherently at odds with Nazism.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But we're not here to talk about the Nazis anyway.
No, but yeah, that was just something that pissed me off. And I'm more just pointing out the fact that, they might be called the Democratic Republic of Korea, but let's be real, they are not democratic. And I'm sure you're going to tell us a lot more about that.
Yeah, absolutely, I will. So the Korean War was an armed conflict between North Korea, South Korea in... some people say it started in 1948 or 1949 when border skirmishes started happening, but the official timeline is more 1950 to 1953. And it was essentially a proxy war at the start of the Cold War. This is the third episode I think we've done on the Cold War this season.
This season?
No. In total. Cuban Missile
in
Crisis.
Total, yeah.
Chernobyl. Yeah. And now the Korean War, which is right at the start of the Cold War.
Honestly, you say that as if that's a lot, but in reality, there's so many things we could do about it. You could do the Vietnam War as an obvious example. You could do the Berlin Wall.
I'm just saying we cover it quite a lot. So
I don't know if we do. It's just the Cold War spans like 50 years, or 40 years. So I don't know.
And it's a cool bit of history. Like
it's really cool.
The last 80 years of history have probably been like some of the most historic bits of history. Like truly,
the last 80 years have been the most historic bits of history.
Historic history.
Okay. Man,
So
you're bringing it all tonight. Holy moly!
I'm on good form.
This is
I'm
going
on fire.
to be a corker. I can feel it.
So not only is it a war between South Korea and North Korea, but it is a proxy war. The proxy war was when...
And the first real proxy war, the first big flashpoint, right?
In the Cold War.
In the Cold War, yeah.
So proxy war is basically where there's a fight between two nations, but they're being backed on either side. So I guess there's currently one happening in Yemen, where it's like the Saudis on one side and like the Iranians on the other side.
Loads
There's
of
just loads
conflicts
happening.
have
You could say... If you were taking a really pessimistic approach, you could say the Ukrainian war is a bit of a proxy war between the US and Russia. But then it's
that's a bit different.
And then China also financing Russia and like so Iran. So it's
yeah, you can say it's a proxy war between US and China, I guess. Yeah.
But then there's no.
But it's different because Korea actually had American people on the ground while the war happening right now does not have.
Has North Koreans on the ground. Though.
It does have North Koreans, but they are odd. Sorry, North Korea, if you are listening to this, that is odd.
You just got North Korea odd.
Well,
a state famous for extra national killings.
Yeah, they are odd though. Like they are honestly an odd nation. I mean, like the way that like they kind of get thrown into the front lines and because they know nothing about it. I mean, it's very sad. Don't get me wrong. It's extremely sad what's happening in Ukraine with North Koreans believing that they're fighting for their country and actually just getting sent to a complete other part of the world just to die.
They must know they're not. They must know that it's just like a...
Mate, you think they're not absolutely brainwashed thinking they're helping North Korea serve its interests?
The level of brainwashing that people think happens in North Korea is very different to the practical, the elements on the ground of like people genuinely believing in like what they're doing in the nation.
I agree with what you've just said, but I don't think that applies here. I think the troops, the North Korean troops that are fighting there, sure, the second they set foot in Russia or Ukraine, they're probably going to recognize, oh shit. But until that point, I think they're absolutely brainwashed, or not brainwashed, but pushed into it.
Brainwashed though.
Pushed into it. They're forced into it as a way.
Are we not brainwashed?
Sure, yeah, not as much as North Korea.
You're pretty brainwashed, actually.
Not as much. Come on though, compared to North Korea, man. Have you seen the tape when their leader dies, who they treat like a god? If the high command,
man
like
under the sun,
Kim Jong-un and all those, when they die, they weep. And I mean like.
Did you not see the lines for the Queen?
The lines for the Queen?
For the Queen's state funeral, when everyone
she's not a head of state.
Effectively, she is a head of state,
but she's not. But she's it's not the same. They're not the same.
It was pretty similar. Like
do
people
me a favour.
queuing up round Westminster.
Come on.
I'm not saying the Queen and Kim Il-sung are on the same level.
You think the UK is as brainwashed with the Queen as the North Koreans are with the leader currently Kim Jong-un or whoever, Kim Jong-il?
I don't think it's that stark. I think
it is stark.
I think a lot of people are anti-monarchists as well, so I guess that's maybe where the difference is.
And I'm sure there are some North Koreans that are anti the government, but they fucking can't say it. We can say fuck the Queen, which I don't believe. I like the Queen, but for the record,
we can say fuck
but
the Queen.
I can say this on a podcast, and we can bring it out, and no one's going to bat an eyelid. No one's going to go, "Ooh, shouldn't have said that." You're now on a list. Mate. You're now on a list.
Prince Charles does stubby fingers around here in a second to poke our eyes out.
Prince Charles ain't choking no one.
Right, we're getting off topic. So it's a proxy war between China and Russia, and essentially China, Russia, and the US don't want it to really escalate into a conflict because they're scared of World War III. 5 years after the end of World War II, Kim Il-sung forces the hand of the Americans and the Chinese. He sort of has the support of the Chinese and Russians and goes to war with South Korea. Almost conquers South Korea before the UN, the United Nations, had just been formed in 1948. The US jump in, and then there's this sort of like massive tug of war on like an epic scale as the US go all the way to the border of China through North Korea, and then the Chinese come back and push the Americans to go back, and they push them back again and push them back again. It gets quite comedic at the end, barring the fact that maybe 5 million people died. Yeah. Really brutal war, by the way. Almost 2.5 million civilians die. Wow. This massive complete unrelenting bombing of North Korea. It's essentially rubble and ruin by the end. So is South Korea. There's basically no city that goes unharmed. There was no change in the end, essentially. There was, I think, the lines on the 38 parallel, which I'll get to shortly, which is a line that divides North Korea and South Korea, have been pushed back maybe a bit more towards North Korea, but very, very little change for essentially the same status quo it started at the beginning.
It's kind of insane that so many people die so much happens in such a short period of time, and yet nothing particularly changes at all about the world order.
That never happens in war, does it? Though the world order's never exactly the same.
It doesn't, but I feel like that's a pretty bad. That's a bad example. Yeah, but that does happen all the time in war.
Let's start with the background of Korea. I love background. You know me. I've got a history podcast. I've got to love the background, right? I've got to love the context of that. But I was trying to go too deep in because I always go a bit too far in.
Okay.
So I'm not going to start with the formation of Korea and what it's like, but basically an independent nation for hundreds of years, although sort of influenced by China back centuries ago. And then in 1904, 1905, after the Russo-Japanese War, Imperial Japan defeat Imperial Russia and they annex Korea. It basically becomes under Imperial Japanese rule, and I've got to tell you, it's not a good time for the Koreans under Imperial Japanese rule. They're pretty damn horrible, the Japanese.
Really?
So this is in 1910. It's annexed and becomes a protectorate of the Imperial Japanese Empire. Koreans leave and they form a provisional government in China. They fight alongside the Chinese in the Burman campaign in World War II, and they start pushing towards this like nationalist identity of reforming an independent Korea once Japan's been pushed out essentially. Then later at the Tehran Conference in 1943, which is one of the big conferences in World War II, alongside the Yalta Conference in 1945.
Yeah, so am I right in thinking that at this point Roosevelt hasn't died? So it'll be Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill all chilling in Tehran. Where's Tehran? Iran?
Tehran's in Iran, yeah.
And then Yalta is when Truman's about.
there, yeah. So
and he tells good boy Stalin about the bomb.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, we're cooking up something real good. And he's like,
watch out, watch your space.
Wow, cool guys. And he's thinking, I've got a literally like full man on the inside. I know like all of this.
Who was it? Carl
can't
something.
remember. In the man,
the German guy.
Stalin had like a. What was he? I thought he was British.
He
had like
maybe Germany defended Britain.
He had basically like just spies everywhere
Yeah.
and knew all about this basically.
Which is important because like the scales of power were very with the US at the start of the war, and then because it had the atom bomb.
Yes.
And then 1948, the Soviet Union successfully detonate their own atom bomb.
And
so
the USA freaks out.
Yeah, it starts what we talked about, the Cuban Missile Crisis. At the Yalta Conference, Soviet Union promised to invade Manchuria, which was basically the northern part of Imperial Japanese rule on the Chinese mainland, essentially. So they invade Manchuria, the US invade the bottom of Korea, and they basically meet halfway down North Korea and South Korea. And they come to a conference and they decide that this is where they're going to partition Korea. They're going to start 2 independent states, one's north, one's south, and they'll be divided at a line called the 38th parallel. Yeah, which is a very famous parallel now. It's a demilitarized zone at the moment, but
30th. Why not the 37th?
Well, the 38th parallel, I think, is 38 degrees north of the equator. So there's a lot of places that sit on the 38th parallel, and I've got some countries here, but maybe you can name them if you'd like to give it a try.
Oh, a geography question.
Yeah, and I know you love geography. So,
so wait, as in
fun fact
basically on the fun fact,
he loves geography.
On the line, so on the line where South Korea and North Korea meet, Russia.
No.
Okay, China.
Yes.
Not Russia. I know it's quite relatively.
It's quite
south.
northern.
Turkey.
Turkey. Yep.
Italy.
Yes.
Then Greece as well. Spain.
Yes.
And then it'll be like USA, which will be Florida around.
You're very good at this, yeah, but not Florida, but USA, yeah.
Because I thought Florida's like basically parallel with Spain. That's why I guessed that. I could be wrong.
I haven't got it here,
I'm
but
not certain on
there's
that.
still 2 more.
Let's get a map.
2 more countries.
Where's the globe? I know there's a globe somewhere here.
2 more countries you're missing, and that's.
Wait, hold on. 2 more countries. I get it. Kazakhstan.
No.
Japan.
Japan's, yep, absolutely. Well done.
And said China, Mongolia.
You were close with Kazakhstan, but not Mongolia. But actually, not really close with Kazakhstan. It's Middle East.
Who's in the Middle East? Georgia.
Nope.
Armenia, Azerbaijan.
Tehran.
Oh,
Iran.
Yeah.
So countries that sit along the 30th parallel include Italy, Greece, Turkey, Iran, US, Spain, Japan, China. Lots of China sits along the 30th.
Where in Italy?
Of course you want to know, don't you?
Yeah.
Italian boy with Italian girlfriend
on,
loves to flex his Italian knowledge.
I'm not asking an Italian question. I'm not flexing any.
Why don't you ask that question in Italian?
Dov'è in Italia?
God, it makes me sick. Right, so the islands of Maritimo, Levanzo, and Sicily, and parts of Calabria.
Yeah, south.
Very cool.
I thought it was. I would have guessed higher than that. Okay, fair enough. Anyway, let's keep.
Second World War's ended.
Oh no! That's a good thing. No, yay!
Yeah.
V-Day.
Well,
But we did have to bomb Japan to do that.
Yeah, Imperial Japan surrendered.
Well, not us, the Americans.
We didn't do anything, Japan. Sorry.
Yeah, that weren't us.
Korea's free, but
Well, which
not
part?
really. all of Korea, but the two nations that will become Korea.
Let's be real though. As much as I love a bit of Soviet propaganda, and we like to be called Russian propagandists, I hate to say it, but the North Koreans and the Soviets are not free. Let's be real.
We'll leave that debate for another time.
Is that controversial? I don't think that's controversial.
No, you can't say like they're not free. Like
the Soviet Union is not free.
Well, my pessimistic take on it
is that it's not binary. It's not binary.
Let me finish.
Sorry, I'm just saying it's not. I get it. That it's not a binary thing. It's a spectrum, but it's still.
My take is that none of us are free.
Yeah, that's a fair presumption.
And then when you really think about it, we're kind of just like under the yoke.
But if we're not free
of oppression,
then they're really, really not free.
I mean, it could be worse.
So come on, that's more my point.
It could certainly be worse.
That's an interesting take.
As a middle class white man in London.
Yeah, you're about as free as it gets, brother.
Which is a economically
actually outrageous. There's people in like these horrible war-torn countries that are oppressed brutally, and they're like, you're not free. You're not free. Sat there in your nice warm podcast room talking about history as if it's good fun, and you're like, you're not free. That is so tone deaf. That's actually outrageous from you. That is outrageous.
You're right.
We need to upload this one as a reel so that the comments can flame you for your absolute awful take.
Yeah, well, touche, Joe, touche. So Korea's free with rabbit ears.
Yeah.
So it's been a Japanese colony for 35 years, and the people of Korea, like I said, suffered immensely under the rule of the Japanese Empire. Cool. The Japanese military actually kidnapped thousands of Korean women and forced them to serve as comfort women. Don't know if you're aware of that. So comfort women were very popular in the Imperial Japanese Empire. When they subjugated and oppressed the land, they would take women, kidnap them, and force them to serve as sex slaves for their officers and soldiers. And this just basically gang rape and like murders, but.
Imperial Japan, man, they really were something.
I'm sure a lot of them found their hands at Unit 731 as well.
Yeah, if you don't know what Unit 731 is, and we're not going to go into it fully here, let me tell you, but search it up. Wait for the podcast episode when we do it.
Maybe next season.
It's about as grim as it gets.
It's probably the grimmest thing ever.
You
don't think so?
I bet there's grimmer.
I don't think there's much grimmer.
But no, don't get me wrong. I think Unit 731 is arguably. I don't know. I was going to say the worst thing about World War II, but I'm talking to a Jew across the table. That makes me feel a bit icky saying that.
The worst thing about World War II.
What else could there have been? Yeah, nothing really competes. Nothing really competes with Unit. No,
I think it was all quite chill actually.
Unit 731 is awful, and yeah, if you want a quick search on Google, you'll see it's pretty bad. So Imperial Japan, they were horrible.
Yeah. Nice French. 1948, Korea is divided now, but free. And there's the Soviet Union established puppet government in North Korea, which is headed by Kim Il-sung in Pyongyang, which is the capital of North Korea. And the US at the same time takes South Korea. Kim Il-sung?
No, Pyongyang.
Pyongyang.
I think that's up there. Better capital names.
Yeah.
Seoul.
Seoul.
Pyongyang.
Seoul.
So Tokyo's good.
Tokyo.
Moscow's alright. Moscow's alright. But yeah, Pyongyang is a pretty cool.
What's the best capital name
in the world?
Oslo. It's quite cool.
Oslo's alright. Oslo's alright. I mean, there's some really cool ones.
Rome.
Quite
strong, isn't it?
Well, it's not. It's Roma, actually.
Is it?
In Italy, yeah.
Rome to me. I'll tell you what my favourite capital name is, without shadow of doubt. Ulaanbaatar.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a great shout.
That's capital of Mongolia.
Montevideo.
Ooh, very nice.
In Uruguay.
Buenos Aires.
Monte, so mountain. Video. Come on, we're cooking.
It's not mountain video.
Well, Monte is, but video is definitely something else. But mountain video as a capital city is
video
pretty lit.
This could be completely wrong for any Spanish speakers or Uruguayans that watch our podcast. Is video not like city or like town?
I don't know.
Like mountain town. Mountain city.
No. Surely it's similar to Italian. Città is a city in Italian.
You don't know Spanish for it?
I don't know the Spanish for city. How do we not know the Spanish for city?
We must do.
That's a really obvious. I bet it's really obvious.
It's really obvious.
Fuck.
So the Soviets established North Korea and the US established South Korea under democratic President Syngman Rhee, who is really not democratic at all. He's basically the most authoritarian, hardline puppet that could possibly be in place. But he absolutely hates communists, and that's kind of what makes him this best type. He's a 73-year-old who
never a red.
That's
my motto.
Better red than dead.
Better
dead
than red.
Is that McCarthy?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know, but yeah.
One communist in the State Department. It's one communist too many.
Is that the...
Yeah, that's it. Never heard that.
No.
That was McCarthy's speech in like 1953 or something like that.
Fair.
Or 1952.
McCarthy.
During the Red Scare.
He was a dick.
Massive dick. So to introduce these characters, Syngman Rhee, who's the president of South Korea, hardline authoritarian. He attended an American Methodist school as a child, converted to Christianity, and became a Korean independence activist, for which he was imprisoned in 1899. He then moved to the US in 1904 and joins the right-leaning Korean provisional government in Shanghai in 1919. He serves as that first president until he's impeached in 1925.
Right.
Very democratic to be impeached.
Yep.
I wonder which other serving president has been impeached. Has Trump not been impeached?
Multiple times.
Yes.
Two times or 3 times? It might be 3. It might be 3 now.
How can you be impeached 3 times?
It might no. I think it's 2 actually, because it was the
Surely
first.
the first time is the last.
You know
time
what the funny one was though? But the first one, I believe, was because he had a phone call with Zelensky before the Ukraine-Russia war to convince him to give dirt on Biden and Biden's son, which was collusion, which is obviously unacceptable.
Hunter Biden.
Yeah, he wanted him to give him as much bad info about Biden as possible that he could use, and the call was recorded and people heard him do it, and so they impeached him. And the second time was January 6th. Right, like he was literally about to leave the door anyway, but they got an impeachment through just before it happened. So that's at least 2. I don't think there's 3.
Impeach me again. It won't stick. Is that not bad? Is that bad?
Try
it. Try and impeach me. It's not going to work. Is that really bad?
It's not really bad. It's just, I think it's very difficult to do Trump.
He then returns to the US after 1925, but he's impeached and advocates for further Korean independence. But, at that time, the Americans, when they hear about Korean independence, were like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. Until kind of thoughts and ideologies shift when they want to stop the big red Russian bear from spreading communism everywhere and to their doorstep.
That is essentially the crux of the Cold War, is that if Russia and the USA have nukes, they can't fight each other, because if they fight each other, they kill the entire world. So instead, what they do is they stop the other country from spreading their own influence.
Yeah.
So communism is this new thing, and the only place that has it at the beginning is the Soviet Union. So if for the Soviet Union to have more influence, they need more countries to be communist. And so the next thing on the foreign policy agenda for the Soviets is trying to spread it everywhere as quickly as they can and as clinically as they can. And for the Americans, it's about stopping that and stemming it, which is why it seems, it's kind of similar to any conflict where, like, why are we sending funds to this country? Or why? It's always because they have their own, America or whoever has their own reasons to want this country to survive or fight the war. And for this moment in the 1950s, it's purely just because America, and I'm sorry, Korea, America did not care about you. It cared about communism not happening.
I would say they care about South Korea now.
Yeah, because of Russia
and
because China.
South Korea is like an unbelievable technological superpower.
Yeah, no, do me a favor. Come on. There's
Samsung.
Come on,
Samsung, bro.
Samsung. No, the only reason that, and let's be real, America is not like the nicest ally at times. They are doing it to serve their own interests, like
the minerals deal for Ukraine.
Exactly. They only care about what furthers their interests. And South Korea and Japan were 2 democratically elected countries that America had huge influence over, that now gave them the opportunity to have influence in a region that is full of the players that want to beat America, which is China and Russia.
Japan is now so strategically important for the US, because it's now a massive ally of the US after being
a bitter
rival.
Since
it's the first bulwark. Bulwark is how you pronounce that word? The first bulwark against. I think it's bullock.
Bulwark.
Bulwark.
You go on.
It's the first bullock against.
Yeah, well, no.
Against China invading Taiwan.
Yes, it absolutely is, and they want that sphere. And the good thing about the Americans wanting to save Taiwan is the fact that all the other countries are terrified of China. So they are happy to help the USA. Japan and South Korea are happy to be allies. I can't remember where this was, but I remember reading something that was saying that you could make a case for maybe 3 or 4 nations that America's biggest and most important ally, but the number one, and in this article I read, in their opinion, was Japan, and probably has been Japan for
absolutely.
many decades at this point
It's like
with the
it's
rise
the
of.
third biggest economy in the world, right?
But it's not. It's less about the because yeah, sure, but like there's not that much difference between the Japanese economy and the German or the British or the South Korean. The point being is that it's so strategically important to that region that America basically needs that ally at all times.
I'd agree with
and
that.
similar with South Korea, which is why in a conflict such as the Korean War, they are furiously, they need to make sure that this country, even if they don't win anything, they cannot lose. That is the number one most important thing to America and therefore the West.
Bulwark. Bulwark is how you pronounce that word. Bulwark is bulwark. That doesn't make sense.
Cool. Great. Cracking stuff. What next?
So back to Syngman Rhee. So Syngman Rhee is now elected as president of South Korea against runner-up Kim Koo, and he's elected with 180 votes out of a potential 198, which is perfectly fine. 92.31% of the vote. Completely adds up, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
He just about got across the line. Ooh. It was quite widely accepted that it was a corrupt election. Mm-hmm. If it was a communist election, that wouldn't be good. But it was a corrupt election. Mm-hmm. Much of his rule was marred by corruption, repression, and anti-democratic conduct.
Yes. He
enacted laws to crack down on political dissent and ordered later the assassination of Kim Koo, the runner-up. So by all means, a lovely bloke. Oof. He was really hardline when it came to communists. And he brutally captured, detained, and tortured communists and suspected North Korean agents during his time in office, such as the Jeju Uprising and the Bodo League massacre, where they basically, en masse, just liquidated thousands of prisoners who they suspected of being communist sympathizers.
Yikes.
So right up the American street, though. So in 1950, apparently he has 30,000 communists in jail and 300,000 sympathizers in re-education camps.
30,000? Bloody hell.
330,000 prisoners in jail.
Of that reason. Wow.
This is because at the same time, the North Koreans are launching guerrilla wars and insurgencies in the south, trying to inspire uprisings and rebellions. And I don't know to what extent they truly are massive problems, but clearly they are popping up. They're being put down. But Syngman Rhee's rhetoric is this is the biggest fucking problem. There's communists everywhere. Yeah. There's guerrilla wars happening all over the place. But I think it's quite sporadic and isolated. Still a problem because it's going to undermine everything and you've got to put it down with the army. Mm-hmm. And it's going to use resources as well. But I don't know if it's it feels more like a justification for him to just go on atrocities.
Yeah. I'm getting that vibe as well.
And Kim Il-sung, who's the president of... is not the president, he's the first premier, I think, of the Democratic People's Republic.
I know nothing about him except his face, because he's on all of
Team
that.
America.
Well, because that's Kim Jong-il. It's because of all that the memorabilia and the propaganda posters of he's got a really bright face, if I remember correctly. And
he's an impressive guy.
And he's got this jet black hair and stuff.
I found myself, when researching him, quite impressed with him. Definitely, you could probably say more so impressed.
You're a communist sympathiser.
Hey, I voted for Corbyn back in 2017.
You're going to jail, brother.
I reckon
getting locked up in 1950s Korea.
I do feel if there was a viable form of communism in the UK, I might vote for the party.
Oof.
A socialist party, yeah. Maybe not a communist.
Mate, I'm not voting commie.
You wouldn't vote commie?
No.
Nah.
Absolutely not.
No, you should grow up, mate.
Absolutely not.
Grow up and vote
I would vote for communism if you could show me one example where communism
worked.
Off.
Oh,
no. Because don't get me wrong, I think the concept works, but it hasn't worked in practice.
For not
once.
Communism, but socialism's worked.
Yeah, but I didn't.
Expertly so.
But I would vote for socialism.
Well, that's not what we're saying. Let's not get bogged down.
Did I stutter? I ain't voting for communism. It's not happening.
I would vote for it if it was a pure form of communism, because that never really has happened.
When is it pure?
It's never pure. That's why it's never worked.
Yeah, because
there's corruption and
corruption is
power.
always going to happen.
Yeah. So
is there any politician that you don't think that you would trust enough to actually do communism correctly and not be corrupt?
Me, man.
Oh,
I could fucking do it.
Oh no, this is the start. This is how
we're going to collectivise agriculture and cause a famine.
Cause a famine.
Yeah, I'm such a champagne socialist, aren't I?
Yeah.
We're not free. We're not free.
Let's not forget, you're not free. let's just remember that. We're not free, sat here in this lovely air-conditioned room.
Such quite hot.
Yeah.
So, Kim Il-sung, really impressive guy, actually. And, obviously horrible dictator, but very, very...
What's impressive about him?
Let me tell you.
What's impressive about him?
Born in Pyongyang to a family that he says was always one step away from poverty. Don't know how much you can actually take what he says about his family's conditions into account.
I'm not impressed yet. I'm not impressed yet, but keep going.
He was a Presbyterian Christian, which I think is...
yeah.
Is that what you are?
No.
What are you? You're Protestant?
Well, technically Protestant.
Yeah.
I'd consider myself Catholic if I was one of the two. So my boy Kim something, what's his name?
Kim Il-sung.
I'll be honest though, I'm still not particularly impressed with him.
Okay, so let me impress you with some facts about Kim Il-sung.
Okay.
So he was involved basically his entire life before North Korea's establishment in anti-Japanese movements.
Okay, that's cool.
He's founded the Down with Imperialism Union in 1926,
right.
according to North Korean sources. And from 1930, he became interested in communist ideologies, and then became the youngest member of the Korean Communist Youth Association, which was an underground Marxist association with only 20 members. Once again, I don't know how much of this is fact or made up by the North Korean sources.
That's decent though.
Still more to come. After the police found the group's existence, he was jailed for several months. He then joined the CCP in 1931. He's lived basically his entire life at this point in China. So he probably knows Chinese or Mandarin far better than he does Korean. And this does come back up in a second. So he joins the CCP and joins anti-Japanese guerrilla groups in northern China. And when the Japanese army invaded Manchuria, he became a member of the Northeast Anti-Japanese United Army, which is a guerrilla group, eventually becoming a high-ranking officer. So clearly quite a good military head, or at least a good soldier. He was then expelled from the CCP because the CCP suspected Koreans of being pro-Japanese. There's about 1,000 members, and 500 of them were killed, and he somehow convinced people enough to trust him that he wasn't a pro-Japanese sympathizer and hated the Japanese and wanted to kill them.
Yep.
And then from that purge, he essentially becomes the leader of the Korean communists in China and Manchuria. They rally around him, and he becomes he changes his name to Kim Il-sung, which means Kim become the sun.
But which sun? The sun in the
lovely
sky
sun,
or the
shining sun in the sky?
The sun, okay, cool.
In Imperial Japan, it's Amaterasu, right? Which means like the king under the sun as well, essentially. So they believe in like the divine
land
rule
of the
under the sun. Yeah,
they love the sun.
And he eventually becomes a major in the Soviet Red Army. So quite impressive, right?
Yeah, I mean,
how are you not impressed by that?
Well, yeah, he's had a pretty cool career up to this point, but a lot of this will also be propaganda. So I'm not like, okay, great.
What, you think he just did nothing?
Well, I genuinely thought you were going to say when he was 18 he killed a bear, and when he was 19 he learned to play the piano.
You think learning to play piano is more impressive than
loves fishing, like stuff like that. I thought you were going to tell me like his personality. I didn't realize it's just all fuck Japan.
Lavrentiy Beria decides that Kim, following the end of World War II, Lavrentiy Beria is the head of the NKVD in the Soviet Union.
What is the NKVD, Zach?
Well, it's the secret security forces in the Soviet Union which brutally crack down and repress the population, inspires this culture of fear and terror in the Soviet Union, and it becomes the KGB and now the FSB, I think it is today. Yeah. Beria, who is portrayed so amazingly in The Death of Stalin, by the way.
Oh,
great
God,
movie.
that's him. Yeah, I didn't realize.
He's the little guy who gets... I'm not going to spoil it.
Beria is basically the antagonist in a movie full of antagonists.
It's so good.
He is the antagonist in the movie.
It's one of my favourite films.
The Death of Stalin.
Jason Isaacs.
I actually watched that literally a few weeks ago with my girlfriend. We loved it.
Oh, you have a girlfriend? Is she Italian? And do you also speak Italian?
Why are you so bitter?
And then he's recommended to become the leader of the communist nation of North Korea following the end of the Second World War. And Stalin's like, sure, sounds good. So, according to reports, he couldn't actually speak Korean very well, and he needs a coach to learn how to speak Korean better, because he spent so much time in China, his Korean comes a bit of a byproduct at this point in time.
Really? But it's his home place, his home country. Yeah,
but imagine when you're speaking from like the age of 18 years old till you're
you don't lose your first
40-something, it probably gets weaker.
Yeah,
and you probably get a stranger accent because you've been like Lewis Hamilton when he pretended he was American for a few years.
Oh, God, yeah. What was that?
Garbage, man.
Still my goat, but what the hell?
He then became the first secretary of the Communist Party of Korea in December 1945. He establishes the Korean People's Army, recruiting guerrillas and former soldiers who fought the Japanese and nationalist Chinese troops as well during the Chinese Civil War. And he equips the KPA with the help of Stalin with Soviet tanks and arms, artillery, equipment. We'll get onto that a bit later as well because that is very important, but essentially uses connections to beef up the army and uses the former soldiers and friends he had to recruit better troops to the cause. And fast forward to 25th of August, he's installed by the Soviets as the premier of the Supreme People's Assembly of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, eventually becoming the party chairman of the Workers' Party of Korea. And begins establishing this like intense cult of personality around him, which is like and that's pictures of him up in the schools and statues.
And that is crucial to the North Korean way of life. Is essentially creating this dynamic where everyone believes, or at least is told to believe, that the royal family, as it were, because it's basically a monarchy, is God's descended
more like
from...
a dynasty than a
dynasty, sure, but descended from God and descended from the heavens. And, for all these things you say is quite impressive about him, I'd say, well, but then he did just get his son to be the next one after that, and then his grandson, and he's kind of like the Bruce Lee. So I don't know if I actually like him that much.
Who do you think he should have got? Just like
I don't know,
the best man
a democratically elected person.
That's not. Get your head out of the gutter.
You're sounding like
it's never going to happen. He's never getting a meritocracy. He's never going to be the right person or like the people's will. It's got to be someone, and it's going to be his son. If you were the head of North Korea, right, and you had a son, and you were the supreme dictator, you were loving the power. You're having a great time.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
You're inviting Dennis Rodman around to play basketball.
Mate, that's right. You did do that. I'd be buzzing. I'd absolutely no. You're totally right. I would love.
You would groom your son. You would groom your son to be the next ruler of. Why are you making those eyes at the camera? You would groom your son, but you raise your son to be. Maybe you would groom your son, you nods. So we've now met the two leaders of North and South Korea this time. Kim, backed by the Russian and Chinese proxies, and Syngman Rhee, backed by the Americans. So both very clearly not right in the head, power hungry, mad authoritarians.
Who isn't?
And the important thing is, both of these people want to unify the country. No Korean is happy with the fact that there's North and South Korea. A classic thing that when a big empire partitions a country, no one's fucking happy with it. Like look at Africa, basically the whole of Africa. Like it was conquered by big states.
I didn't expect you to say that.
I'm not saying that Africa's a bad place. There's plenty of countries in Africa which are
it just felt a little bit charged. You went, look at Africa. It felt a little bit charged.
No, like Africa is a direct result of what imperialism has done to the world. We've partitioned it, and it's now there's countries constantly warring with each other. There's like that whole spot in like the middle of the south of Africa where there's 5 or 6 countries where there's guerrilla forces in the forests bordering everyone.
Right now.
So at this time, North Korea and South Korea are established. In 1948 and 1949, border clashes start emerging before the war actually starts in 1950 between the South Korean and North Korean armies. So for the North Koreans, it's the Korean People's Army, the KPA. And for the South Koreans, it's the Republic of Korea Army, ROKA. And they had these border skirmishes. And this is why a lot of people think the war actually started in 1948 rather than 1950, because 100,000 people die. These border clashes are enormous. The civilians in the bordering areas, like towns and villages on the border. Seoul is very close to the border. Pyongyang's not too far north either. So a lot of people are being caught up in these clashes. Thousands of casualties on either side from soldiers. And hundreds of thousands of civilians dying in these border clashes before the wars actually even started. In these clashes, the Republic of Korean Army typically perform well and they beat the communists, but with like the increasing uprisings and guerrilla war that's happening in the south, they're diverting all their resources away from it. So while they're dealing with it quite well on the border, for like these small minor scale skirmishes, they're being increasingly depleted of resources. They're losing numbers, losing command structures. They're basically sort of like this shell of an army by the time the Korean War actually comes around. And in this time, in October 1949, the guerrilla insurgency starts up right again. And it was sort of quashed in the early 1949, but then in October 1949, it comes and revives itself with like a renewed invigoration. And there's like 6,000 communist sympathizers who were killed or captured by March 1950. And this goes on to about the spring of 1950 when the border clashes and the guerrilla insurgency starts stopping. But like I said, the Republic of Korean Army is just a fragment of its former self.
Right.
Kim Il-sung knows that. He kind of understands that the South Korean military is depleted. Both countries are yearning for unification, and he thinks, you know what, they're fucked. Their army is ruined. This is the best time possible to go in there, take the country quickly with this like terrible army that's been fractured and beaten back for 2 years and take over the entire country. So he begins seeking Stalin's support for an invasion in March 1949. and travels to Moscow to persuade him. It's
You travelled all the way to Moscow, wow.
Yeah, Kim Il-sung. Stalin decides that in 1949 it's not the right time, but in spring 1950, Stalin changes his mind. He thinks that now the communists have won in China and the Chinese Civil War is over.
So that's actually a topic I'd like to do as a thing. So the Chinese Civil War is over at this point.
Yep, the communist leader Mao Zedong and his forces have defeated the nationalist Kuomintang of General Chiang Kai-shek, I think. So there's a communist China.
And his best mate, Xi Jinping's dad.
Is he?
Yeah,
What,
Xi Jinping,
Chiang Kai-shek?
one of the royalists, not royalists, but one of the
Nationalists.
One of the nationalists from the Chinese Civil War, of like the high command was Xi Jinping's dad.
Oh, fascinating.
And he basically had to denounce his father when
Really?
Yeah, when Mao Zedong took over.
You know, Xi Jinping has an unbelievably interesting history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you read into it a little bit? Cause,
he basically foregoed his family name and the fact that he is obviously quite a rich, wealthy, has opportunities everywhere. And instead, he basically just went from the ground up. He started as like a village. Yeah, he became like a political representative in some tiny village.
And he was so good at it.
In rural China. And he was so efficient and consistent, well-spoken, great in every way that he
got accepted to university.
It just basically his career just skyrocketed up and up and up and up until I think he was the mayor of Beijing or Shanghai. He became.
I'm not sure about that, but yeah.
He basically became the I don't know if it's mayor or governor or something, but he basically became the top official for a city, a big Chinese city, and from there he became the head of the CCCP.
Impressive guy. He's not.
So he is an impressive guy. As much as the CCCP is worrying, I do have to admit Xi Jinping is quite impressive.
He is, yeah. You know they call him Winnie the Pooh.
Really?
Yeah. I can't remember exactly why they call him Winnie there.
He's done quite a good. He's done.
I think it's because he looks like Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, so he's actually done quite a good job of marketing himself as quite a nice old man to his people. Obviously, we know what might be happening to the Uyghurs in the middle of the
northeastern China.
Yeah, but there's a lot of bad things that China might be doing, but he has marketed himself to his people remarkably well. Not in Hong Kong though.
No, not in Hong Kong, you're right.
They're not pint-sized politics, I'll stop.
Yeah. So in spring 1950, Stalin changes his mind. He thinks now that the communists have won in China. The US had withdrawn from Korea. They had a force there that was advising the Republic of Korean Army, but they pulled out now. They got like 200, 300 soldiers in Busan, which is the southeast of South Korea, basically the most southern eastern point closest to Japan. Right. The Soviets have discovered nuclear weaponry and unlocked nuclear fusion to have an atom bomb. Yeah. Stalin acquiesces and gives his consent in April 1950 for Kim to attack the South. He makes clear, though, that Soviet forces would not be involved. So Kim meets with Chairman Mao Zedong, the new leader of Communist China, to get his support from China in the event that America intervenes. And he does so. Yeah. Mao's quite hesitant. They're a bit worried about the US intervening, but he basically gives his express consent. He says, if they do invade North Korea, we'll step in. The big tiger will step in. I love that the Chinese is referred to the waking the tiger, Yeah. And at this point, the KPA, the Korean People's Army, is made up of 10 infantry divisions, about 130,000 men, a lot of whom have seen combat experience in communist China, in China's Civil War, sorry. They're advised by Soviet personnel. They're equipped with Soviet weaponry. They've also got thousands of Chinese troops, a strong force. And on June 25th, 1950, Kim Il-sung senses the South Korean weakness and gives the order, and the North Korean army launches its full-scale invasion of South Korea. At this point, the North Korean army, like I said, 150,000 to 200,000 troops in 10 divisions. They have a tank division, an air force division. They have 210 fighters, 280 tanks. They have which of those are Soviet T-34 tanks, so really, really quite modern and good tanks at that time. Yep. 200 artillery pieces, 110 bombers, and 100 tanks in reserve. So it's a big force. So South Koreans, despite being twice as big as North Korea, 20 million people, had an underprepared and ill-equipped army. They had almost 100,000 soldiers, no tanks, as the US were skeptical about giving them tanks because they didn't want to anger the Soviet Union. Right. 22 planes in an air force and 200 to 300 US troops. So really quite weak. But there's an enormous US garrison and air force and fleet in Japan. stone's throw away.
Right. Okay.
It's a nice clip, that.
Yeah. Nice. That's nice and clear.
And I think that's where we'll leave part 1.
Oh, okay.
So we're ready to go. North Koreans amassed on the border. They've equipped with Soviet weaponry, and they're ready to strike out against the South Koreans.
Nice.
And I think we'll start the next part with the war itself. But
the war itself. So we've just spent all this time blue ballsing ourselves up to the beginning, and now we're saying goodbye.
Indeed we are. Thank you for listening. Catch us next week for part 2. And as I always ask, please like, subscribe, recommend, review, and tell everyone about us.
All that good
Go
stuff.
get yourself a great beer too.
Yeah, do one of those. And we'll see you next week. So cheers, guys.
Bye.